At dinner with the billionaire's mother, the shy waitress signed, "Your son should meet more interesting people." When he asked what she really said, I froze. He'd caught my lie, and I was about to lose everything. My hands trembled as I realized Marcus Blackwood had understood enough to know I'd mistranslated his mother's words. Standing there in Leonard's crystal-lit dining room, wearing my black waitress uniform and clutching a $400 bottle of wine, I felt my carefully constructed new identity cracking apart. For 3 months, I'd been invisible to him, just another servant refilling his glass. Now, his steel-gray eyes were studying me with the intensity of someone who'd discovered an intriguing puzzle. What I couldn't tell him was that I wasn't really Anna Rivera, struggling waitress from Queens. I was Dr. Elena Vasquez, former MIT professor with a PhD in computational linguistics and fluency in 7 languages. 2 years ago, I'd been making $180,000 annually as a senior research scientist at Blackwood Industries' AI division, developing breakthrough translation algorithms that were now generating millions in revenue. The reason I was serving tables instead of publishing papers. Marcus's own company had destroyed my career based on fabricated misconduct charges filed by his head of research, Dr. Charles Brennan, the man I'd foolishly trusted with both my work and my heart. When I discovered Charles was stealing my algorithms and passing them off as his own, he'd preemptively accused me of data theft, sexual harassment, and corporate espionage. HR had terminated me within 48 hours. No investigation, no due process. But what Charles and Marcus didn't know was that I'd been methodically documenting everything for the past 18 months. Every algorithm theft, every forged email, every meeting where my innovations were credited to Charles's team. I had time-stamped code repositories, encrypted backup files, and most importantly, recordings of Charles bragging about his theft to colleagues, all stored on servers he couldn't access or delete. "The vegetables comment was creative," Marcus said, stepping closer. "But my mother's sense of humor runs more toward family embarrassment. She was discussing my bachelor status, wasn't she?" My pulse hammered. "I should return to work, Mr. Blackwood." "Actually, I don't think you should." His voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to getting answers. "You corrected my pronunciation of recherche under your breath 20 minutes ago. Perfect Parisian accent. Most linguistics students don't achieve that level of fluency." The observation hit like a physical blow. I'd been so careful to hide my expertise, but intellectual habits die hard. "I picked up some French in college." "Columbia has an excellent linguistics program." He wasn't guessing. Somehow he already knew. "What made you leave academia for restaurant work?" This was the moment I'd rehearsed for 18 months. The moment I'd either retreat back into invisibility or take the first step toward reclaiming everything Charles had stolen. Looking up at Marcus Blackwood, I realized something crucial. He wasn't just powerful enough to destroy my enemy. He was the one person with direct access to proof of Charles's fraud. "Sometimes brilliant people get betrayed by those they trust most," I said carefully. "And sometimes the betrayer chooses the wrong victim." Marcus's expression sharpened. "That sounds personal." "Very personal. Involving your company, your head of research, and algorithms worth approximately $12 million in annual revenue." I watched his face transform as the implications hit. Marcus Blackwood hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by ignoring potential fraud in his own organization. His next words would determine whether I remained a waitress forever or finally got my revenge. "I think," he said quietly, "we need to have a very different conversation, one that doesn't involve wine service." Mrs. Blackwood caught my attention, signing with obvious delight. "He's finally interested in someone intelligent." She winked before adding, "This should be interesting." For the first time in 2 years, I smiled genuinely. Yes, it should be. The next morning, I sat across from Marcus in his private office, no longer wearing a servant's uniform. I'd chosen my best interview suit, charcoal gray, severe lines, the armor of someone preparing for professional warfare. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched below us like a conquered territory. "Show me what Charles Brennan stole from you," Marcus said without preamble. I opened my laptop and pulled up files I'd thought I'd never use. "The foundation of your AI division's success. The Prometheus translation system. Charles presented it to your board 14 months ago as his original research." Marcus leaned forward as I displayed the development timeline. According to his documentation, he conceived and coded Prometheus between March and July 2022. Except I developed the core algorithms in 2021, before Charles and I were even dating. I pulled up my encrypted backups. "This is the original code, time-stamped and verified by MIT's servers. Notice the commenting style, the variable naming conventions, the architectural decisions." Marcus studied the screen intently. His technical background was solid. He'd understand what he was seeing. After 10 minutes of silent analysis, he sat back heavily. "The foundational work is identical, not similar, identical, down to inefficient code segments that any competent programmer would have optimized." He looked up with something between amazement and fury. "Charles didn't just steal your algorithms. He literally copied and pasted your entire code base. It gets worse." I opened another directory. "The harassment charges he filed against me? Here's the actual context." I played an audio recording from a team meeting, clearly showing Charles making inappropriate advances while I deflected professionally. Notice the timestamp. 3 days before he accused me of misconduct. Marcus's jaw tightened as he listened to Charles's voice. "Come on, Elena. We both know who the real talent is here. Why don't we discuss my promotion to division head over dinner? Your recommendation would be appreciated." My recorded response was calmly professional. "Charles, please keep our discussions focused on research outcomes." "He propositioned you," Marcus said flatly, "then filed harassment charges when you refused. Corporate insurance against whistleblowing. If I expose the algorithm theft, he could claim I was retaliating for his rejection of my advances." I pulled up more files. "But I wasn't his only victim. Charles has been systematically stealing credit from female researchers across 3 departments. For the next hour, I laid out a pattern of fraud so extensive it would make front-page news. Dr. Rebecca Foster's machine learning breakthroughs, credited to Charles. Professor Diana Torres's natural language processing innovations, presented as his original work. Dr. Lisa Bennett's breakthrough compression algorithms, now generating millions in licensing fees under Charles's name. "My God," Marcus said finally. "How long has this been going on?" 4 years. I have documentation going back to 2019. I opened my master file. "Charles identified a systematic weakness in your HR processes. Female researchers, especially those without powerful mentors, could be marginalized through carefully orchestrated misconduct allegations. Once discredited, their work could be appropriated without significant risk." Marcus was quiet for a long time, his fingers steepled as he processed the implications. "The legal exposure alone could bankrupt the company. Patent fraud, employment discrimination, systematic harassment. We're talking about hundreds of millions in liability." Charles counted on that fear. He believed you'd bury any investigation to protect the company's valuation. I closed my laptop and met his eyes directly. He didn't count on someone patient enough to build an airtight case. "What exactly do you want, Elena?" The question I'd been preparing for 18 months. "I want Charles Brennan to experience what it feels like to lose everything because someone more powerful decided he was disposable. I want every stolen innovation returned to its rightful creator. I want the world to know that Blackwood Industries' most profitable AI division was built on the theft of women's intellectual property." I paused, watching his expression carefully. And I want to rebuild what he destroyed. Not just my career, but the careers of every brilliant woman he silenced. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was predatory. Charles Brennan has no idea what's coming for him. None whatsoever. Good, because I've been looking for a reason to restructure our research division. This gives me something much better, a reason to rebuild it entirely. He opened his calendar. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I want you to present everything you've shown me. My heart hammered with anticipation and terror. Marcus, if we do this, there's no going back. Charles won't surrender quietly. No, he agreed. But Elena, I didn't build this company by avoiding necessary fights, and this fight is very, very necessary. The emergency board meeting convened at 9 a.m. sharp in Blackwood Industries' executive conference room. 12 directors, 3 VPs, the general counsel, and Charles Brennan himself, looking confident and slightly puzzled about why he'd been summoned with less than 18 hours' notice. I sat at Marcus's right hand, my presentation materials neatly organized, while Charles occupied his usual seat at the far end of the table. He hadn't recognized me yet. Why would he look twice at a woman he'd successfully erased? Thank you all for adjusting your schedules, Marcus began. We're here to address systematic fraud in our research division that threatens both our legal standing and our intellectual property integrity. Charles straightened slightly, his expression shifting to professional concern. Marcus, if there's been some kind of security breach, my team has protocols. The fraud, Marcus continued, involves the systematic theft of intellectual property from female researchers, accompanied by fabricated misconduct allegations designed to silence victims. Now Charles was paying attention. His eyes swept the room, clearly calculating threats and responses. When his gaze landed on me, I watched recognition dawn across his features like a slow poison. Elena. He said my name like it tasted bitter. What is she doing here? Dr. Vasquez, Marcus corrected, is presenting evidence of intellectual property theft valued at approximately $50 million. Elena? I stood, connected my laptop to the projection system, and faced the room full of executives who controlled my professional future. Gentlemen, what you're about to see will fundamentally change how this company operates. For the next 90 minutes, I systematically destroyed Charles Brennan's career. Every stolen algorithm displayed with timestamps proving prior creation. Every forged email matched against server logs showing unauthorized access. Every fabricated misconduct report contradicted by audio recordings of the actual events. The room grew quieter as the evidence mounted. Board members stopped taking polite notes and started asking sharp questions about legal liability. The general counsel's face went progressively paler as he calculated potential lawsuit settlements. Dr. Torres's compression algorithm alone, I explained, generates $4.2 million annually in licensing revenue, all credited to Dr. Brennan, despite clear documentation of her original development work. Charles tried interrupting twice. The second time, Marcus cut him off with surgical precision. Charles, you'll have opportunity to respond when Dr. Vasquez finishes her presentation. By the time I reached the final slides, Charles looked like he might be sick. The evidence was overwhelming, documented to a degree that would survive any legal challenge. I'd spent 18 months building a case that could withstand the best defense attorneys money could buy. In summary, I concluded, Dr. Brennan has systematically stolen intellectual property from at least 7 female researchers, generating approximately $50 million in revenue that should have been credited to the original inventors. The pattern suggests deliberate, premeditated fraud rather than isolated incidents. Silence filled the conference room. Then Charles shot to his feet. "This is insane," he said, his voice shaking with either anger or fear. Marcus, you can't seriously believe this fabricated nonsense from a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for cause. Terminated for fabricated causes, I corrected quietly. As the evidence clearly demonstrates. Charles whirled on me. You were stealing proprietary code. I have documentation. You have forged documentation, Marcus interrupted, his voice deadly calm. Dr. Vasquez has provided original server logs proving your allegations were manufactured. The general counsel cleared his throat. Charles, I strongly advise you to retain independent legal representation before making further statements. Charles looked around the room, clearly realizing his position had become untenable. Marcus, we've worked together for 6 years. You know I would never... I know you've been systematically defrauding this company, Marcus replied. Elena, thank you for your presentation. The board will need time to discuss appropriate responses. As the executives filed out for private deliberations, Charles lingered, his face cycling between rage and desperation. Elena, whatever you think this accomplishes, you're destroying your own future. No one will hire you after making accusations like this. I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in 2 years. Charles, you're assuming I need to be hired. I'm not looking for a job. I'm starting my own company, with backing from investors who value authentic innovation over stolen brilliance. His face went white. You can't. Actually, I can, and I will. I closed my laptop with satisfied finality. Goodbye, Charles. Enjoy explaining this to your wife. The board's deliberations took 37 minutes. When they reconvened, Marcus's expression was grim but satisfied. Charles Brennan's employment is terminated effective immediately for cause, including fraud, theft of intellectual property, and systematic harassment of colleagues. Security will escort you from the premises. Charles started to protest, but the general counsel cut him off. Any further statements should be directed through your attorney. This meeting is being recorded. Additionally, Marcus continued, Dr. Elena Vasquez is hereby appointed as Chief Innovation Officer for our newly restructured research division, with full authority to investigate and remediate past intellectual property misattributions. I felt a surge of vindication so pure it almost brought tears to my eyes. Not just a job, a position of real authority, with mandate to fix everything Charles had broken. The board also authorizes Dr. Vasquez to establish the Authentic Innovation Initiative, designed to support female researchers whose work has been systematically undervalued or misappropriated. Charles was escorted out by 2 security guards, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. As the conference room door closed behind him, I realized something important. I wasn't just getting revenge, I was getting the chance to prevent future victims. Elena, Marcus said as the room emptied, how does it feel to have your life back? I looked around the executive conference room where I'd just destroyed my enemy and reclaimed my career. It feels like justice. Good, because we have 18 months of damage to repair, and I suspect you're going to enjoy every minute of it. He was absolutely right. 6 months later, I stood before the MIT Alumni Association delivering the keynote address on intellectual property protection in corporate research environments. The auditorium was packed with brilliant researchers, many of whom had experienced their own version of what Charles had done to me. The investigation I'd led at Blackwood Industries had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. Charles's systematic theft had contaminated 43 separate projects over 4 years. We'd restored credit to 11 female researchers, recovered over $60 million in mislabeled intellectual property, and identified patterns of bias that reached deep into our hiring and promotion systems. More importantly, Charles Brennan's career was thoroughly destroyed. No major corporation would hire him after the scandal broke. His published research was being systematically reviewed for additional fraud. His wife had filed for divorce when the extent of his professional misconduct became public knowledge. He'd gone from head of research at a prestigious company to unemployable pariah in less than 6 months. The lesson, I concluded to enthusiastic applause, is that authentic innovation always has a paper trail. Truth has timestamps. And brilliant work, no matter how carefully stolen, eventually demands to be returned to its rightful creator. After the speech, Marcus found me in the reception area. How does it feel to be famous for the right reasons? I laughed, thinking about the woman who'd served him wine just 7 months ago. It feels like I finally understand my own worth. Good, because I have a proposal that might interest you. I'm listening. Blackwood Industries wants to spin off the Authentic Innovation Initiative as an independent consulting firm. You'd be CEO with full equity and complete operational control. Our first client would be conducting systematic IP audits for Fortune 500 companies. The offer was everything I dreamed about during my worst days serving tables. What made you decide to support this? Marcus smiled. Because the night you signed to my mother, I realized something important. The most valuable innovations often come from people who've been systematically underestimated. I want to build a business around finding and supporting those people. I thought about all the brilliant women whose work had been stolen, all the researchers who'd been silenced by powerful men who feared their competence. When do we start? Immediately. We already have requests from 12 major corporations who want comprehensive IP authenticity reviews. As we walk toward the future I'd never dared to imagine, I realized something profound. Charles Brennan had tried to erase me because he'd recognized my potential threat to his mediocrity. Instead, he'd forced me to become dangerous in ways he'd never anticipated. The shy waitress was gone. In her place stood someone infinitely more formidable, a woman who'd learned exactly how powerful she became when she stopped hiding her brilliance. And I was just getting started.